Knack, this is Knack, and I've got an interesting project for you today. We're going to be making a lamp, a small lamp, I should say, out of a tall lamp, out of a floor lamp. So we're going to be modifying something. It's my wife needs some extra light in the children's schoolroom, and I don't want to wire it. I don't want to spend the time getting up into the attic and things like that to wire new lights to the ceiling. And I don't like floor lamps when we've got lots of children. They get played with, they get knocked over. And even if they never get knocked over, these cheap ones are just screwed together, and those joints will end up getting ruined if people wiggle them and play with them and all. So they tend to not be super child friendly. You just have to leave them alone. But we're going to be modifying that and turning it into something that sets on top of a very tall shelf and cast light in a lot of different directions. So let me show you what kind of tools we're going to be using for the project, what we need to get this done. So first off, you're going to need some light bulbs. I've got others besides just the 4, since obviously this one's going to require 5 light bulbs, as you can see here. And I just picked this up at Home Depot. And we're going to be wasting a lot of the parts, but you know what? For the price, it's not that big of a deal, especially if you can modify it into something that's going to work perfectly for you. But simple tools, we're going to need a pair of scissors, a nice tough pair of scissors, and or an X-Acto knife. So that, and then you need 2 particular drill bits, specific sizes, especially if you're going to be modifying this same one, this Hampton Bay floor lamp. So you're going to need a 15/32 drill bit, so it's big, but it has to be that exact width. And the reason is because we're going to use a screw that's in this section here, and this is the exact width that you're going to need, or diameter, I guess. Size is another good way to say it, so that it can screw in safely. You're also going to need something fairly close to a 17/64. So anything really close to that will be fine. That one's I think about the perfect size for what we're going to be doing, but if it's a little off, that's not going to be a big deal for that particular one. However, this big one, it's got to be the exact right size. You're going to need a router, and I've got a very small bit already put in there. As you can see, it's just a small, standard, straight routing bit. And we're just going to use that to make a groove. And I'll show you that as we get to that step here in just a little while. You're going to need yourself a hand drill, and you're going to need an iron, and then a couple measuring tools. Actually, the measuring part is not as important as it is for you to have a straight edge. And then let me show you the pieces that we're going to use to modify the lamp. It's fairly simple. We've got kind of an interesting style about the schoolroom. It's very square. There's a lot of squares and things like that. And so I've got myself here just some plywood. It is birch plywood, nicely finished. It's about the nicest plywood you can get as far as birch goes. It's very straight, no warps or anything. You're going to want to buy a nice piece of plywood, something that's going to stay nice and flat, because this is going to end up being the base of our lamp, our new lamp. And I've already got it cut 1 foot by 1 foot, so 12 inches by 12 inches. And we're going to use some birch banding. Comes pre-glued. You can get this at most hardware stores. And that's going to go around the edges. So, oh, real quickly though, I didn't mention the size. You do need something that's 3/4 of an inch here. So here, I'll measure it for you in just a second. There you go. You can kind of see that it is 3/4 of an inch. But yeah, it needs to be at least that thick. Thicker is going to be fine. It doesn't really matter how thick it is, but thinner could be problematic. So I would probably go for at least that 3/4 thickness there, and that should be good. But we've got a couple steps to do. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Pay attention to this beautiful music, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, a little bit of explanation. First off, yes, I did rip up the instructions. There is no need for those silly things. But and I also cut off all the warning tags. So, oh man, sometimes it just what companies have to tell people to keep them safe, supposedly quote unquote safe. Things are quite ridiculous, but we're getting started. The first thing we're going to want to do is get these holes drilled in this board. Mark the center because we're going to want to center it, and we're going for our big drill bit first. Now, we don't want to plunge this through the board. I've got it clamped to the table, but I'm not going to push it all the way through the board, obviously, because I wouldn't want to mess up my table either, but also because the design doesn't really need it. So we want that screw that you might have seen just a little bit of on the lamp. We're going to have it screw down just a little ways in. It turns out it's about 1/2 inch, and I'm pretty good at doing that by eye. If you have a drill press, then it's very, very easy to to force your drill press to plunge only 1.5 inches into it. So if you've got a drill press that will accept a board that big, then more power to you. Good on you, and you're a better man than I am, or woman for that matter. And then I'm going to use the smaller drill bit to center out a hole that goes to the back side on that. And obviously I did not poke my table at all or scratch it. Be very careful if you're going to use your kitchen table. Please do not drill through your kitchen table. I'd hate to get in trouble for that. So yeah, we've got the hole drilled. The next thing we're going to do is, this is the bottom side of the board that we're going to use as the base. You can see that it's got some flaws on it that I didn't really like. So what we're going to do though is make a groove now that accommodates the cord of the lamp, so that the base will sit flat on a flat surface. Obviously, if you had a cord running under it, it's not going to sit very flat. So we're going to make a small groove with the router to get that done. You saw me mark the lines, and we're just going to route right down the lines. I'm just using it's a 1/8 straight bit, and I'm plunging it the exact depth, just slightly more than what the thickness of that cord is. So I measured the cord and then set my depth to be just slightly more than that. But you run it down and clear the material out, and that's going to allow the cord to sit in there quite nicely, and the rest of the board to sit flush against whatever surface you choose to set it on. I imagine you're going to be setting it on a flat surface. I guess if you're not going to set it on a flat surface, if you're going to set it on gravel or something, then it doesn't matter if the cord's there or not. So, but chances are you're going to need it this way. And router is probably the one thing that most people aren't going to have. And if you don't have one, then one thing that you can do is use a Dremel tool carefully to grind it out, or you can actually use a chisel to chisel it out. But be very careful if you're going to use a chisel. You don't want to mess your board up. So be careful that you don't cut too much material, but you can get it done with those other methods as well. Okay, so the base is looking pretty good. The next thing we're going to do is put the banding around the side. What's the word for that? Oh, Google. So it turns out that the best, the term for it is banding, veneer banding. There's a couple different brands and other names for it. Some people will call it hot melt edge banding. Is a common name for this type of thing, but basically all it is it's got a heat sensitive glue on one side of the banding, and I use an iron. There's an actual tool for it that's a lot smaller than an iron is, and a little bit easier to control, I'm sure, because of that, but an iron works just fine, especially if you're not going to be doing a whole bunch of this. You don't need to run out and buy yourself a special tool. Just get it done with your standard iron. It won't mess up your iron. Just make sure you don't have any water in there. You don't want to steam it. But basically all you do is cut it. I waste material and just cut it a little bit longer. I don't mind sanding it off later. But you want to make sure and cover the edges. And the banding is generally larger than 3/4 of an inch. So if you buy 3/4 of an inch banding, it's generally a little bit larger, just so that you can have slight mistakes here and there. Plus, it's not perfectly straight a lot of the time. You got to remember, it's made from real wood. So that stuff, as it dries, it warps, it moves, and things like that. And so it's, generally speaking, a lot wider. And that's why you have a sander. If you don't have a sander like this, a big disc sander, which is, oh man, can I tell you, extremely useful in this scenario. It just takes care of those little edges, the little lips that you leave on there as you put it on. If you don't have one, other things that you can do is just use a knife. Be very, very careful, but you want to put it on there. Have a good angle. You don't want to be angling it down, and then just slide it across very carefully. What you want to do is use the face of your board to help guide you, and just slice that edge off. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. You can also just use like a hand sander. Those sanding sponges would work just fine. It might take you a little bit longer, but if you're going to sand it, make sure that you're not going in a direction that would potentially pull that banding off. You want to go the opposite direction. So I left out the other shots of me putting on the 3 other sides, but I've got them all on there at this point, and I'm just going to put some Danish oil on there. This will yellow the birch just a little bit, and so I don't want it to become too yellow. And one thing you can do if you don't want the color to change too terribly much, is use a little bit of mineral spirits. The mineral spirits will kind of thin out the oil, and I didn't really want to mix it. So what you can do is actually just put it on the board first, the mineral spirits on first. And what that will do, as long as you don't allow time for it to dry, it will fill some of those voids just a little bit with the oil or with the mineral spirits. And then when you put the oil on, it will mix with it automatically, and it will not allow too much oil to get into the grain of the wood. So it's probably not a professional woodworking method, but it actually works fairly good for me. So anyway, you put it on there, and you just want to make sure when you're putting oil on like this, some parts of wood are more dry than others, and will soak up that oil a lot faster. And you want it to look uniform right after you're done putting it on there. You want some. You'll notice that some spots will look really dry, like it soaked it right up. So make sure that you keep putting it on a couple of times and wipe the different spots. And there's some spots that won't soak up very much at all. Make sure that you're wiping off excess. So it's fairly easy. Danish oil is quite nice. And then if you want to put on like a lacquer finish or like polyurethane, you can put polyurethane on after a finish like this. Just make sure that you allow for appropriate drying time before you put on another finish. But Danish oil, quite honestly, is a nice finish for what we're doing, especially for indoor applications like this. But and I was just testing this, just kind of giving you a little sight, but we're not going to start assembling this quite yet. We've got a couple other things to do first, and we've got to go cut a ring. So part of that lamp is this big pipe with those, and it's threaded on the inside there. And you remember that we were measuring that earlier. You might have noticed as we were getting ready to put the banding on that I took a moment to go ahead and measure it while the iron was heating up, and I marked it. And so I'm just cutting it like you may know that in my shop I don't have a metal cutting bandsaw, so I usually use a very dangerous chop saw blade on a grinder to cut metal. But if it's thin enough, then I'll just use my belt sander, and that's what you saw me do there. If you don't have a way to do it, then you can use a file to cut this, or a hacksaw to cut it and then sand it down. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do, and that's one of the tools that I probably should have put on up front, was the sander and or a hacksaw. So sorry about that. I'll make sure and put it in the comments below. But yeah, you'll want to get something that you can cut your metal with. And then I just sanded it down to size and then cleaned it up really well. When you sand metal, especially with a power tool like that, it's going to create a mess in those grooves or in the threads. So make sure and take time to clear that out. And then that just goes over the cord and onto the light fixture. And we basically have it set up where, since I measured it, I have it set up where the smaller screw will go straight down into the hole that we drilled, and then that ring will take all of the pressure. We wanted to distribute the pressure as far out as we could from the center of that hole. And so
there's that bigger bolt that it screws onto, it will not actually touch the wood. Only that little ring will. And what we do is we just screw it in as tight as possible and let that dig into, since it's quite thin, just let it dig into the wood a little bit, and that will give kind of a nice permanent friction bond to it. So pretty good. When you're putting it in, make sure that you're keeping that bolt straight in. You want it to be perpendicular as it goes into that hole. If it's not perfectly straight, it will bust out that wood. Birch is kind of a softer wood, so make sure that's going in straight or it will bust it out. But we've got it screwed on here, and we're essentially done. All we've got to do is hook this cord back up. You'll notice at the beginning I just cut the cord. The bolts, the one thing you could do if you really wanted is disassemble the light fixture itself and then reassemble it. But I think they've got those bolts like Loctited down, like glued together. So it's not really worth it. Plus you run the risk of scarring them up or bending them or something like that. And I just didn't really want to mess with that. But again, we are essentially done. Put those light fixtures on, I guess the shades, if you will, and then get some light bulbs in there. And I've got some first-person commentary coming up here in just a moment. I'll be right back.
Okay, we're all finished up here. And it's kind of bright. I'll turn the lights off here in just a second, but and it's a fairly simple modification. But I'll also give you a shot of what it looks like with the matching shelf that we've made this for. So, but all in all, it looks pretty good. This works just fine through here. This will go up flush and not push that up, so this will sit nice and flat. And it's a cool lamp, really, so I'll flip the lights off and you can get a better idea of what it looks like. Not too bad. But you can point the lights in all different directions, which is a nice thing. And you eliminate that big, tall floor model section of it. So let's go install it, and you guys tell me what you think about it. And another thing I'd like to do is have everybody else who's doing modifications shoot me a little video or some pictures or something of the modifications that you're doing, and we'll post them on the Facebook page. Things like that. So anyway, fairly simple. You can see that bend looks really sharp. Really quite good. Get a nice shot of it there, but look at that. I mean, it looks like this is just a piece of birch wood. And down there you can see that little ring that we cut. Nice transition. It's pretty cool. All right, well, thanks so much. Let's get you one more shot here in just a second. Okay, here is the final product. I did build two of them. You can see it pumps out a lot of light. And this room, see that wood paneling? It just makes it really dark in here, so you just need extra light. And the only light fixture we've got was this one. So with 3 bulbs, it wasn't quite enough. But we wanted that, and you can see it's got this nice tall shelf. Put the lights up there on the top, and it's going to pump out a lot of light. It's making it really bright in here. I know on the camera it's probably washing it out quite a bit, but anyway, I think it turned out really well. And you can see the squares kind of match, so everything's kind of square here. And we put those squares up here. Looks nice. You can see it matches this. This is faux birch, but this is the real deal. So. But it looks nice. It matches quite well. So, good. All right, and I really do want to see some other modifications. If you guys can make a video response of the modifications that you guys are making, specifically lamps for this one, let me know. And thanks again for watching. The next video I'm going to be putting up is the one that I mentioned in my previous video, actually, where we're going to learn how to drill semi-precious stone. So look out for that. I should have it up shortly in the next couple days or so, maybe sooner, maybe even today. I've just got a couple more clips to cut and then we'll be set to go. So thanks again. We'll see you guys later.